because now Portugal is very much on the map in terms of wines. You could argue 10 years ago, not as much. But what do you think? What do you think makes wine so good here?
Well, the technology has got a lot better, and that's important. Wine is, we can argue about the percentage, but I'm going to say 50% artistry and 50% science. And David Baverstock is almost single-handedly responsible for introducing the science. When he came 40 years ago, a lot of vineyards were producing occasionally great wine, but the quality was all over the place and there was no consistency because they didn't have laboratories and chemical analysis. They weren't using it to the same extent. And I think he's widely credited as introducing this industry-wide and making Portuguese wine a lot more consistent. But here, what I like about it and what drew me to it as a place to base a winery was the interesting grape varieties. We've got 280 indigenous varieties, which you only find in Portugal.
And second most in the world, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's probably right. Italy has the most, I think.
Italy has the most, yeah. There's a debate where Georgia has possibly more than Portugal, but officially, sure, yeah.
Yeah. So that makes it interesting. And we use a bit of Syrah, but that's the only international varietal we have. But otherwise, we're using purely Portuguese varietals.
Yeah. Syrah works really well here. Everything that I've heard is that it grows really well here. It bottles really nicely. We love a good Syrah here. Why is that, do you think?
I don't know. I guess the climate must just suit it. It must be that. You know, it's a hot climate grape, and we have that. But tradition as well, I suppose, plays a part. I mean, there's no reason why Cabernet Sauvignon couldn't do really well here, as far as I know, but there's very little.
Yeah.
And I think that's good that we should stick to our guns and stick to our local varietals. And that should be a point of difference. Unfortunately, the point of difference makes it also a little bit more difficult because it's harder for people to understand.
Yeah.
You'll be familiar with the practice. You walk into a bar or restaurant, we all do it, even if we're wine wankers like me and in the industry. I'd like a glass of red wine, please. We've got a Syrah, a Cab Sav, a Pinot. Nobody asks who made it, where's it from, what year is it, what the quality is.
Yeah.
So there's a race to the bottom by bars and restaurants just to have the cheapest of those varietals, which aren't going to make people throw up when they taste them. And in fact, you know, if you go and ask the customer after he's drunk that glass, what did you think of that wine? I wasn't really paying attention. I'll have to go and have another go at it to give you an informed opinion. But you can imagine if that's the way that it works in bars and restaurants, the idea of explaining to your punter that this is a blend of 20 different indigenous Portuguese grapes with names they never heard of, they're going to have fallen asleep by the time you finish the explanation, or they're just going, well, I don't know what that is. I'll go for the Cab Sav, please. And that's what happens. So it doesn't make it easy to sell.
I think the story around the wine is super important because you've got, I mean, I grew up in South Africa. It's all single variety. It's very rare that you'll find a good blend. But a good blend in Portugal is very common, you know, and the way that they pair the wines is actually fantastic. But it's to sell that story is the challenge.
It is hard. I mean, I suggest to bars and restaurants, look, what you're trying to do is get a glass of wine in front of your punter as easily and quickly as possible so that they can you can move on to serving somebody else and or get them to order a second one because they've got it quick. So you can actually cut down the time by just saying, well, the best red wine we've got on the list is this. Boom, done. You don't even have to list the number of varietals, and we're trying to train them to do that because, as I say,